I know, I was like, oh, that's so
All right, folks.
It's a $30.
Anybody watch Wednesday on Netflix? I've just been watching. It's so good. Oh my gosh. All right.
Now?
It's so spooky. It's very Halloweenish. All right. We got our Halloween sugar already. Okay, folks, before we get started, just so you're aware, in case you see strange people in the classroom, we have a couple, people are looking around like, who looks specific? It's Halloween and we're talking about strange people in the classroom. We have a couple of guests with us, today, who for various reasons, wanted to come hear this. So Kaylee and Katie, over here are both PhD students working with me. It looks like Young's not gonna come, and Lindsay's a PhD student in social work, who I think is gonna join us on Zoom. So just in case you're wondering, who those folks are. The plan for today, we're gonna do our survey. I think this is our 5th time, so we've got one more for our class data. I'm gonna show you a little example of how we can use Excel to solve a problem. Gonna talk briefly a little bit more about mediation and moderation. I know I told you I wouldn't, but some of you were interested, so just a little bit. And then the bulk of that is going to be what I call the look under the hood lecture. So we're gonna talk about how research gets published, what your professors do, how you become a professor. We're gonna talk a little bit about grad school and what that's all about. And then we'll wrap up talking about App 5 and App 6 and what to expect next week. All right, you know the drill. Here's your class project survey. Okay, I might say must turn that on.
Wait, no, I didn't join.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, now you don't need to go. Like, hey, did you not say? You're like, I was there, you idiot.
Thank you. Like, and I can yeah, my responses are a lot. Like, I'm actually happy now.
And if she's logging in, she'll bypass the waiting room. We good? If not, you can ignore me for a second. So I want to start by giving you a little example of how we can use Excel to solve problems. Not sure if I'm telling you this for your benefit or my benefit, because I had too much fun doing this, so I want to share it. So I'm gonna be super nerdy here for a few minutes. So a little background information. So you all know I do a lot of volunteer work with the United States Tennis Association. So the USTA has a huge volunteer base, including at the national level, so it's actually divided national and then geographic. About 250 people serve on national committees. There are, I think, roughly 20 committees, give or take, in a given year. We get about 600 applications for those 250 spots. Again, the organization is divided into 17 geographic sections. Applicants can apply for up to 3 committees. And then before we select the committees, we select the committee chairs. So our role, and I say our role because there's a group of us that are responsible for slotting 250 people onto 20 committees when we have 600 applications. So how do we do that? So how do you efficiently evaluate applicants, while also accounting for diversity, geographic representation, skill set representation? So a little more background. So each committee chair receives the applications for everybody who applied for their committee and ranks them. Each geographic section receives the applications from their section and ranks them. So I had that data to start with. So what I did, this is a lot of text, but it's just to help me remember. So first I took each candidate and I turned their rank into a relative rank. And by that, I mean, if someone was from a small section and they were ranked number 2 out of 4 people, that was weighted less than someone who was in a big section and ranked 2 out of 100 people, right? 2 out of 100 is a lot bigger honor than 2 out of 4. So they got a relative rank there from both their section and their chair. I averaged those to create a total score and then sorted them. Okay. And I took, depending on the committee and the committee size, but like the top 10 or the top 12, and said, these are on the committee, these are not. Then I create a formula to automatically flag anyone where there was a high variance between how the committee chair ranked them and how their section ranked them. So if the section said they looked great and the committee chair said they looked great or looked terrible, then there's a little flag here that tells me to actually go look at their application because something's going on weird there. Okay. And it creates some additional flags if the chair says they want them on their committee, but their average score is low. And it creates additional flag if the chair says they don't want them, but their average score is high. So it's just alerting me to go look at those applications. And then the last flag it's creating is if they don't get a ranking from their section. And the reason for this is we want to make sure we're getting new volunteers in and not just people that everybody already knows. So we want to make sure we're not just continuing the old boys network. So once I created these formulas, like it did it automatically, like the Excel program ranked and flagged. And so now instead of reviewing 600 applications, I have like 3 per committee that I actually have to look at. So this was super nerdy and I had way too much fun doing it last night. But I did want to share, it's just an example. There's my spreadsheet. Example of how you can use Excel to solve complicated problems and make your life more efficient. And yeah, it just takes practice and thinking like, how might I do this? Okay. We talked a little bit Tuesday about moderation and mediation, and I told you this is a pretty advanced skill. This is definitely a grad school skill, but I introduced it to you just as an FYI. Some of you thought it was kind of interesting, so I'm going to talk about it just a little bit more. This will never show up on a test, but you know, if you want to incorporate it in your project, you can. This actually could be extra credit. All right. So before we talk about moderation and mediation, let's talk about something that does not have either of those. So direct relationships. So let's say we're interested in parental support and peer support predict self-esteem. Okay, so these are our predictor variables. Okay, these are our outcome variables. Okay, this could be a correlation rate as one goes up, the other goes up probably. Okay, so parental support, the more parental support you get, okay, sorry, the higher your self-esteem, probably positive correlation. The more peer support you get, the higher your self-esteem, probably positive correlation. But these two things, our two predictors, have nothing to do with each other, okay? These things do not influence each other. So these are direct relationships. We talk about moderation. Moderation is the strength of a relationship between a predictor and an outcome variable depends upon a third variable. Strength of a relationship between an outcome and predictor variable depends upon the third variable. Let's look at some examples. So let's say we're looking at work stress predictor as related to job satisfaction outcome. So no moderation yet. Okay. Let's say we look at that. We run our results. We find there's a strong negative correlation. A strong negative correlation between work stress and job satisfaction. Take 20 seconds, tell a friend what that means, go.
Job satisfaction. Yeah.
All right, I see some hand motions, so let's do it. As work stress goes, I'll flip it on you down. Job satisfaction goes up. As work stress goes up, job satisfaction goes down. Exactly. So negative correlations are enemies. They are repulsed by each other. They run away from each other. Okay. So that's without moderation. So let's throw in moderation. Okay. Let's look at social support. So I might say the relationship of work stress to job satisfaction depends on if you have social support. Relationship between work stress and job satisfaction depends upon if you have social support. In other words, if someone lacks social support, then stress is likely to decrease job satisfaction. In contrast, if you have social support, then stress probably has no relationship to job satisfaction. The social support serves as a buffer. Right? Yes, it's stressful, but your friends are supporting you, so you like your job. Whereas if it's stressful and you don't have that support, you don't like your job. So the relationship between those two things depends on the third thing. However, if they lack social support, I don't think I should have. This is how we typically visualize it. Another great potential moderation, again, is in your project. Okay, so we are looking at different stressors, overall well-being, and different coping skills. Okay, it's likely that we'll find the higher your stress, the lower your overall well-being. Except that might depend on your coping skills. So if you have high school stress but good coping skills, that may not actually reflect your overall well-being. Okay? If you have high school stress and bad coping skills, this probably has an impact. So for your project, you do not have to do moderation by any means, but if anybody is interested in tackling this as a moderation model, I'm happy to help you do that. I think it'll be really interesting. All right, mediation. Mediation is the relationship between two variables goes through a third variable, the chain link. Goes through a third variable. Mediation, the relationship between two variables goes through a third variable. Let's give you a simple example. Okay. Coming to class increases your understanding of the material, which improves your grade. understanding is your mediator. Come into class, increase your understanding of the material, which improves your grade. It's a chain link. Now, in our case, you get some points for coming to class. So we also have a relationship from class directly to grade. So we can have both. Okay. So see, this arrow goes from attendance to grade because there's a direct relationship because you get points for attendance. But most of it comes from it increases your understanding, which then increases your grade. So that's mediation. All right. If you find that stuff kind of interesting, want to tackle moderation on your project, I'm happy to help you run that statistic and help you work on it. Or if you just find it interesting, you might be destined for grad school. All right, switching gears. So our focus for today is going to be, I was kind of, again, the look under the hood lecture. This is just for shits and giggles, okay? But it's relevant to evaluation and research. And I think most of you have no idea kind of the university role in this, your professor role. I had no idea as an undergraduate, or the whole publication process and how that happens. So we're gonna walk through that. Before we get there, we need to understand one distinction, which is primary research and secondary research. In primary research, you are directly collecting firsthand data, surveys, interviews, observations. You are analyzing that data and you are coming up with a conclusion. So for your class project, we're doing primary research. You are collecting data from people, we're analyzing it, we're coming up with conclusions. Secondary research is you're relying on data that someone else got. You're reading about someone else's analysis. We do both. We're primarily trying to teach you the skills to do primary. We'll talk about how you read secondary, or how you read primary, which is here in secondary. But again, when someone says, I do my own research, it probably means they're Googling. It doesn't mean they're collecting data, analyzing the data, coming up with their own conclusions. My constant complaint about vocabulary in this class, why do we have to use the word research for both of those things? But so be it, so be it. All right. Where's here's cute. So what we're going to answer today is, how does research get published? What do universities and your professors do? What's grad school about? And how does one become a professor? Anybody ever for a class had to read an academic article, or you'll hear a journal article? I hear some head shaking. Yes, yeah. What's that? Yeah, okay. So you know roughly what that is, okay? The important thing here is these are what we call, they're primary research, usually. And they are peer reviewed. They're peer reviewed. And we're gonna talk about what that means. Okay. There are lots, like hundreds of journals out there, academic journals. These are just some that are in our field. Probably a little more weighted to me, sorry. But so Journal of Sport Management, Leisure Sciences, Journal of Park and Recreation Administration, Community Development, Annals of Tourism Research, Nonprofit Management Leadership, Therapeutic Recreation Journal. There are again, hundreds out there. So how do you get something in one of these journals? Well, the first thing you have to have is an idea and some justification for why you need to collect that data. Okay. Why is this important? Is there something we don't know that this will help us know? You submit that along with basically your processes to an ethics board. It's called the IRB, or the Institutional Review Board. Okay, every university has their own. Okay, those folks review it. They say, you need to change this, you need to change that, or they say, cool, you're good to go. We have this in place because once upon a time, people did really awful things in the name of research. There's a great movie about the Stanford prison experiment, which is, I know a couple of you know it. Yeah, so professor had people, college students volunteer, and they were assigned either roles as prisoners or wardens. And they lived in this dorm for, I think it was a week. And the wardens got increasingly abusive and they just gonna let it go in the name of research. So there's all kinds of bad things that have been done, which is why we have this layer of ethics board approval. Okay. Once you do that, you go out and collect your data. Okay. Surveys, interviews, observations, okay. Whatever that may be. Okay. You collect your data, you analyze your data, you write it up. Okay. You use that IMRAD format that we talked about on Tuesday, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. You're trying to make a case here that you're creating new knowledge, and here's how that new knowledge fits into what we already know. Okay. So you've done all this work, which takes months, sometimes years. Okay. And then you submit it to one of these journals, like, yay, I submitted. And now it's the time for the next step. All right. Each journal has an editorial board. These are people who research in the field. They are usually professors. They're usually professors. They have usually one editor, sometimes a couple, sometimes they'll share, but usually one executive editor, an editorial board. Those are called associate editors. Some journals have a layer in between this. They're called section editors. So this is the Journal of Parks and Recreation Administration. So I'm a section editor. So it's just another layer, but broadly it's editor and then associate editors. All right. You submit your article to this journal. It goes to the journal editor who looks at it and says, this might be okay, or nope. If they say no, we call that a desk reject. They just send it back to you and said not accepted. And you're like, well, that sucks. I spent years doing this. In most cases, they say, okay, this is worth a closer look. The editor assigns it to an associate editor. So that's that journal review board. Ideally, the associate editor has some expertise in the topic. That's why they're on the journal review board. They then send that article to 2 to 3 other reviewers, or what we call our double blind. Okay. Which means when they get that article reviewed, they don't know who wrote it. Okay. The author does not know who reviews it. Okay. They will make comments, suggestions, just like a professor grading yours. Then they're going to make a recommendation. They're going to say, this is awesome, publish it. They're going to say, this has potential, but it needs a lot of work. They're going to say, like, nope, not good enough, reject it. Okay. They're going to make that recommendation back to the associate editor, who then actually is the final recommendation, or sometimes the editor depends. Okay. Usually that falls into these categories, except minor revisions, major revisions, reject and resubmit, which is kind of the same thing as major revisions, or just reject. The first time you submit, okay, not the first article, but the first time that article goes to the journal, almost never, ever, 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 ever gets an accept immediately. In fact, if you get something that comes back as minor revisions, I'm doing a happy dance. Usually you end up in this major revisions or reject and resubmit category, or reject. If you're lucky enough to get revisions, you make the revisions just like you would if a professor gave you feedback. You send it back to the journal, and there's a whole conversation. Like, you send back your revisions. Also, you respond to the reviewers, which sometimes is like, thank you for that comment. To address your comment, I made this change. Sometimes, and this gets tricky, it's like, thank you for that comment. I think you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. Which is a dicey game to play, but sometimes you play it. And sometimes the reviewer's like, okay. And sometimes they're like, no, I'm right. Now it's a reject. You're screwed. Ideally, after multiple revisions, your paper is published. Most research gets rejected upon initial submission. Depends on the journal. But most journals in our field, around 50 to probably higher than that, 60 to 80% get rejected. So again, you're talking about like sometimes years of work and it usually gets rejected. The good news is then you take it to another journal and try again. You take their feedback, you make edits, and you take it to another journal and you try again. Part of living in this world is learning to live with rejection. It's like being an actor. I always compare it to like you're always trying out for shows and you get rejected a lot. My personal record is I had a paper rejected six different journals before one accepted it. And it's not crazy, like that's pretty normal. I know people have had like 9, 10. Get rejected. But ideally it's getting better and better. So there are lots of different journals out there. Some are really good. Okay, so the really good ones are obviously hard to get into. Okay. The ones that are not as good are a little easier to get into. And so that's also part of the game. Like sometimes I think this paper I wrote is really good. I'm going to submit it to this top tier journal. And if it gets rejected, I'm just going to kind of go down. I'm going to go down in quality. Okay. You can find that out. They have this thing called impact factors, which is basically a measurement of how often papers in that journal will get read and cited in other papers. Or Google, it's actually easier to look up. Google Scholar has what's called an H-index. Again, the higher the H-index, the better the journal. Okay, it means it gets cited more. So what does this have to do with universities? Overwhelmingly, what gets published is written by professors. So that's step one. Universities, there are different types of universities. And the most common classification on one spectrum, we have what we call research or research-intensive universities. These are usually abbreviated as R1. If you hear the term R1, that's an R1 school. These are research universities. Okay. At the other end of the spectrum, you have teaching universities. A lot of the Cal States, like Cal State Fullerton, as an example, are teaching universities. What this practically means is that a research university, a good chunk of your professors spend a good chunk of our time doing research. We're out collecting data, writing it up, trying to get it published. Okay. At a teaching school, those professors teach. That's what they do. Okay. They don't really have an expectation that they're researching and publishing. You at Arizona State are at an R1. We are what's considered a high intensive research university. We're at like the very top end of the spectrum. University of Arizona is like that. Okay. NAU is one of those that's kind of in the middle. Like they have some research expectations, but not nearly as much as us. So as an undergrad, that probably seems irrelevant to you. You certainly don't see it. I'm going to tell you it's quite relevant to you, but certainly not in a way you see. So advantage of a teaching school, we'll start at the other end. Okay. If you are at a teaching school, this is a smaller school, your professors teach, that's all they do is teach. Ideally, they're experts on teaching because that's their focus. Okay. If you are at a research institution, you have a mix of professors. But again, a good chunk of your professors are part of our job is doing research. Okay. Here's why that matters to you. I pause because it's hard to tell this without like sounding a bit arrogant, but blushing. Okay. But we're just going to live with that. All right. Research universities attract the best candidates. People who get their PhDs and other professors, for the most part, not everybody. I have friends who are great and they're like, I don't want that pressure. I don't like it. I just want to teach. Awesome. They go to teaching school. But in general, research universities attract the top candidates. Ideally, again, I think I'm couching my language because I don't want to sound arrogant, but the way this should work, it's supposed to work, is you get exposure to the top experts in their field in the world. Okay. Your research faculty at a research institution are internationally, worldwide recognized experts in their field. So I'm told, I'm not sure I believe it, but I am supposedly an international expert in youth sport. So ideally, this is, if you're interested in youth sport, like, you have access to me and like that wealth of knowledge. Okay. If you're like Nick, Nick has kind of a tourism angle, like all of us have our own little niche, right? But in concept, at least, you have access to this wealth of knowledge and expertise that someone at a teaching school does not. Now, what you're quite aware of is that doesn't mean we're good teachers. So that's your challenge, right? Sometimes people can be the most expert person in the world and they can be a lousy teacher. Well, that doesn't help you. That doesn't help you. Okay. It also gives you access to things like undergraduate research. Okay. And it has more impact on graduate students. But in concept, you have access to that level of expertise. But again, nothing's 100% sure. All right. So what do your professors do? Every school's a little bit different. I'm going to talk about ASU. Okay. Your professors broadly fall into 3 categories. You have, and the titles we use here are assistant teaching professor, associate teaching professor, professor of practice, and clinical professor. Those are all kind of variations on a theme. Okay. The folks in this category at Arizona State, their job is focused on teaching. Okay. They do not have a research expectation. Okay. So it's also kind of a nice thing about a school like this, you can get the best of both worlds. Okay. You get folks whose job is teaching, and that's what they're focused on, and ideally they're experts, and you get folks whose job is a mix. Okay. So folks you know who are in that category. Aaron, Claire, Rebecca Goodman, Anne, Kelly Ramella, Christina Coleman. I think that's probably who you know in that category.
A lot of people should know Alicia Montalvo.
Is she, what's her, look her up on ASU and tell me what her title is. I'm seeing it. Okay. So those folks' job is primarily teaching.
Oh, Claire is primarily.
Claire is primarily teaching. So those folks teach 4 classes a semester. Okay. So that's why if you get a lot of Aaron, Claire, and Kelly, it's because they teach 4 classes a semester. Okay. They are on either 1-year or 3-year contracts, usually renewable. But they are on a limited contract. Okay. The general term for these folks, we call them career line faculty. Sometimes you'll hear the non-tenure track, but I don't like that term. We shouldn't define something as what it's not. We should define it as what it is. So career line. So again, it's Claire, Aaron, Rebecca Goodman, Rebecca Berry, if you've had her, whoever else I said, Ann, Kelly, Christina. That's, I think, most of the folks you know. Steve Sassaman, some of you have Steve now. So again, they're teaching 4 classes a semester. Their focus is teaching. They are not, and we're going to talk about this term in a second, at issue, they are not tenure eligible. Okay, they're not tenure eligible, and we'll talk about that in a second. The second bucket you have at ASU, because we have to be weird and use a different name than everybody else, we call them faculty associates. Okay. Most universities call them adjunct faculty. Okay. These are folks who are usually professionals in the field. Okay. This is not their full-time job. They teach a class a semester. Okay. These folks are great because they have professional experience. They're not necessarily skilled teachers. Sometimes they are. These are the folks that are like always terrible at Canvas. 'Cause, like, right? Yeah, you're laughing, you're laughing, right? Because it's not their job, right? That's not what they do, but they are great because they have a wealth of professional experience and connection. So John Sefton, Beth Dietrich.
What about Melissa?
No, Dale's in this category, but Dale, I get why you might say Dale, because Dale had a long career as a professional and then he retired from that and now he's full-time professor in practice. He actually fits in this category.
So he's like a free job.
Megan Budrick's in the other category, which I haven't talked about yet.
What about Melissa?
Melissa,
Learn music. Graduation stuff.
Melissa
oh
Goita,
yeah, she's here. Marcus is here.
Learn music as well,
Okay, huh?
Learn music.
Yep. Okay. So those folks, they have a full-time job, they're teaching on the side because they think it's fun, because they want to give back to the profession, all kinds of reasons. But again, these folks pick their brains and their connections. They are well connected in the world. They are working. They're going to be very practical. Be nice to them if they screw up Canvas. Okay. Also, they're not always as responsive because they have another job. Yeah. Okay.
So what are their qualifications? How do they even get?
Yeah, so they have to have a master's degree in the field, okay? And then they have to should be working as a professional, so they should have some expertise in the topic. Okay, so like John Sefton, and apologies, that's who I know best, like is a Parks and Rec director teaching a class on Parks and Rec facilities. Like, he knows it well. Beth is a TR person at the VA. She knows that well. So that's how those folks get hired, okay? And then the last category is what we call tenure track faculty. They have titles called assistant professor, associate professor, and professor. By the way, no one is assisting anyone. Terrible titles, terrible titles. Okay. Assistant, associate, and then professor, full professor, okay? These folks, and I'm in this category, which is why I use first person. Approximately half our job is research and half is teaching. So where Aaron teaches 4 classes a semester, I teach 2. Because the other half of my job is doing research. So folks in that category, me, Megan Budrick, Nick, who else might you have had? Mark Roseland, some of you had. No, I know. Being recorded, I can't say anything else. I know. Okay, but yeah, Grace.
Just wondering how might these intersect for like school clubs? Because I know that my mom does TSA, but like,
Yeah.
I know that they interconnect.
Yep, great question. And I can hold it for 1 second. I'll come back to it. Don't let me forget. So me, Nick, Mega, Mark Rosen, Dallin Timothy, is it Dallin? Some of you know Dallin. I think he's teaching undergrad class. Trying to think of Gordon Shockley from the nonprofit folks might know. The thing is, there's like about half, a little less than half of the department are this category. Those folks, don't teach as many classes, right? We only teach 2 a semester compared to 4. And also, they also teach graduate classes. Nick and I are a bit of the exception. We are the exception that we only teach mostly undergrad. So again, half our job is research. Right? So Grace asked about student clubs. Student clubs, and the rule has changed over the years, have to have a faculty advisor. So anybody in one, and they have to be full-time, so they have to be in one of these 2 categories. Anybody in one of these 2 categories can advise a club. A couple years ago, they made a rule that didn't last long, that if you were in this category, there had to be 2 of you, which was really dumb. But worked out well for TSA, because that's why Aaron now helps Claire. They got rid of that rule. And the last year, they made a rule for sport clubs. That sport clubs didn't used to have a faculty advisor, and now they have to have a faculty advisor. which means I'm the faculty advisor, like 5 sport clubs, because they found me and I'm like a sucker for that one. Obviously, I have the Sports and Parks Recreation Club, which is where I spend most of my time. Club tennis, club hockey, club soccer, club table tennis. Trio Devils, which Megan McDermott really runs. You all know Megan. But has to have me sign off, but it's Megan, so like whatever, I trust her. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Keep going. Yeah, please.
So any research that you find yourself, you have to put Arizona State University on it.
Yep.
Wow, what if it's like will you be maybe like told, research this, if you found something that was completely interesting, like your brain thought of it, you still have to put Arizona State?
Great question. Let me answer in a second. So do you want to add?
Okay.
No, I was saying you should tell them about the overhead at ASU for grants.
Okay, I'm gonna get both of those. Because those are kind of two different questions. All right. So let me talk about this thing called tenure, because this is related to your question, Grace. All right, tenure, which is the term you may have heard, is permanent job status, okay, that protects you from being dismissed without cause. Okay, in the academic world, it's an appointment that can only be ended under extraordinary circumstances. So folks who have tenure, and I'm incredibly blessed that I do now, it is really darn near impossible to fire us. It's not impossible. Like if they were to close the School of Community Resources Development, they could be like, bye bye, we don't have a place for you. Or I do something really, really egregious. They could, but it's really, 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 really hard. Okay. The reason why this relates to Grace's question is the origins of tenure. And the reason for tenure has to do with what we call academic freedom. Okay. So academic freedom, and this protects, meaning I can research something. If I find out something that ASU doesn't like, they can suck it. Because I have tenure, right? So the idea behind tenure is to let you explore ideas, and if you come up with a controversial finding, then so be it. You're protected.
Okay.
And then someone asked me here, are there people who get tenure and then abuse it? Because they're like, sweet, I'm gonna sit on my butt and do next to nothing. Yeah, it happens. Not most, but there are people. Yeah.
Wait, how do you get tenure?
Great, you guys are a step ahead of me today. I'm gonna almost come to that. Let me answer Kayla's question. So part of research, to do research, we frequently need money. Okay, and not just my salary. And that's where grants come in. Grants are sometimes organizations will pay us directly to do work. So I'll apply for grants. Other folks will apply for grants. You may see those amounts and be like, wow, like, look at you. Like, so for the most part, when I get a grant, I get very, very, very little of that money, if any. Frequently, I get none. Okay. So the way it works, if I get, let's say, $100,000 grant, okay, you're like, ooh, $100,000. Okay. 58% of that goes to the ASU for overhead, meaning they provide me an office, computer, support staff, whatever. So they take 58% of that. Okay. And if you're like gasping, which is appropriate, keep in mind that helps keep your tuition down. And I know it's too high already. Okay.
It keeps going up.
So, yeah. I know. Don't tell them to take any more of my grant money then. So that leaves, what are now I have $42,000 left. Okay, so what do I do with that money? Well, the first thing I do with that money is I hire graduate students to help because they need it more than I do. Okay, and that usually wipes it out. Okay, if there's some left, then I can take summer pay because technically I only get paid for 9 months. Not that I only work 9 months, but technically I get paid for 9 months. So I can take some, but it's very little. Okay, so that's how that works. All right. How do you get tenure? So here's the process. First of all, you have to be hired into a tenure track position. Okay. So the folks who are hired into those career line positions are not ever eligible. You have to be hired into the position and say you are tenure eligible. Okay. It varies by school, but at ASU, you have 5 years. It's a 5-year probationary period. Okay. So if you ever been on a job and you have like a 90-day probationary period, right? For tenure, you have a 5-year probationary period. Okay. During that 5 years, you're expected to do excellent work. That's the language they use. Excellent work. Okay. You're expected to publish. You may have heard the term publish or perish. Yeah, you're expected to be publishing your research. You're expected to be teaching, but you're expected to be bringing grant dollars. So there's all these metrics you have to meet. It's quite intense. Okay. And at the end of your 5 years, you submit your tenure. It's called a case. That's a 4-page double-space statement of like how great you are, which is a really weird thing to write, by the way. Your academia, we call them CVs, which is your resume. Okay, they're also weird. Mine is 38 pages. Okay. Yeah, and that's mostly because of the publications, right? Because I list all my publications about what they're about. I list every class I taught, the reviews I got for those classes, all those things. Okay, you submit 4 examples of papers you've published. You submit all your teaching reviews. You think those don't matter? They do. They do. You submit your teaching peer evaluations. So you may occasionally see another professor in your class that are there to evaluate. And then one other piece of teaching evidence. So from when I went up, I submitted a paper I'd published with an undergraduate student. So you have all that, you know, it's 100 pages plus. Okay. First thing you do is it gets sent to 10 external reviewers. So it gets sent to 10 professors at different universities. Okay, these are the top professors at their universities. They're what we call peer universities or aspirational universities, meaning they're either like us or we want to be like them. Okay. Those 10 folks, you technically don't know who they are. You're not supposed to know who they are. We're a small world. I tend to think. I remember after I submitted mine, a colleague who I knew was like, hey, I just wrote your tenure letter. I'm like, oh, thanks, cool. I guess you were one of my reviewers. So they go to those 10 folks, they write letters back saying, yeah, they're great. No, they suck, whatever. Okay. Your packet then gets reviewed by a committee at the department or school level. So CRD committee. Again, that gets reviewed by your department or school chair. It's Christine Bazinde for us. It then gets reviewed by a committee at the college level, at Watts College level. It then gets reviewed by the dean of the college, Cindy Leitz in our case. At this point, you get a check-in. Okay. And the dean, every one of these people below, by the way, sometimes it's a formal vote, sometimes it's a recommendation, like yes, they should get it, no, they shouldn't. Okay. When you get to the dean, you have a meeting and the dean says, seems like it's going pretty well, or I don't know, right? At this point, you have an option to withdraw, okay? A good chunk of people withdraw at this point. And it's really just like, I don't want to deal with the crushing blow of not getting it, okay? Assuming you continue, then goes to a committee at the university level, okay? Then goes to the provost, Nancy Gonzalez, and then it goes to President Crow. Okay. All these people make a recommendation, 1 vote counts, president. It's the only vote that counts.
If you revoke or if you you
Pull out.
pull out, yes. Does it save you from like any kind of like?
You have 1 year to find another job.
Oh, like you're done.
Yep. Okay. So, finally it gets to President Crow. Okay, by the way, you submit your tenure file here in March. You get your result from President Crow the following May, so 14 months. Okay, 14 months. You're waiting. Okay.
I forget I applied.
Trust me, you do not forget. And here's why you do not forget. Because at the end of that 14 months, here's what they tell you. Congratulations, have a party, or I'm sorry, you're fired.
Oh, you're
In
gone.
risk, high reward.
High risk, high reward.
So you
Yep.
get to do your job. You can't just go back to being.
Why?
Once you're on a tenure track, the idea, if you're a tenure track, the idea is that we are hiring you and expecting you to be exceptional. And if you're not exceptional, you're gone. You have 1 year. You have 1 year. So I say you're fired, you have 1 year. That year has gotta suck, by the way. When I got my job here, what I didn't know, at the time was the reason it was open is the person before me didn't get tenure. And I remember thinking it was really odd because they would ask me like, I'd be like, oh, I won't say his name, but I was like, yeah, he and I have really similar interests. I can see us working together. And like, it wasn't part of any of my interviews. I never met him. I thought that was a little odd. And later I found out why. One of my colleagues who's no longer here, but you're kind of stereotypical, zero social skills academic. His office was next to mine. Like my first week here, he brings this cute little plant, this cute little cactus plant over. And he hands it to me, he's like, welcome. And I was like, oh, Mark, like, oh, that's really nice of you, thanks. And he's like, oh, it's not that nice of me. It was the person's before you, but he didn't get tenure. That plant is still alive. I guess I'm safe now, but I used to refer to it as the cursed plant, like, but it's still alive.
Like,
So it is a super stressful experience. It is high reward. It is high reward. I got it in 2021, so I've had a couple years now, but before that.
How long did it take?
Huh?
it's 14 months, right?
Process.
So at the end of the 5 years, you submit your packet, and then you wait a little over another, so at the end of your 6th year, you find out. The end of the 6th year. So, yeah, so I got, Nick is on that path right now. I know Nick always seems like super laid back, but, he's gotta be stressed. He's halfway through. He's halfway through. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, Jeff.
like he dodged shoot.
You have time to speak more about the relationship of tenure.
I think like he's on his way to
with,
like.
So I think
Ooh.
it's like halfway.
doctoral candidates.
Yep, I'm gonna, you guys are just a step ahead of me. Getting there. Yeah, so that's the tenure process. Okay. So again, it's your research faculty. So me, Mega Budrick, Nick's on the process. He doesn't have tenure yet. I forgot who else you know, but. Yeah.
Is there, like, does it matter how many people can be on the process at once? Or is it just Nick right now, or like?
No, but like you hire people when there's openings, just like any.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, so, you know, so if you get, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Tessa.
Well, so Mega, she led the study abroads, and is that like part of research, or do they,
That's,
if you're
so
tenured, do you get
what I
that?
don't tell you just because it gets confusing is, actually that falls under teaching probably. But technically, we're 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% service, but I don't talk about the service piece because it's complicated. It's not service the way you think of service. Okay, it's like reviewing manuscripts for journals. Yeah, so there is, so I said there's assistant, associate, and then just professor. We say full professor, but you never actually hear that. So assistant is generally not tenured yet. Associate is tenured. Okay, full professor is just the next level, but it's just more like prestige. That's nothing other than that. Okay. I have 3 more years I'm hoping to go up for full. Okay. All right, so again, here's our buckets. Okay. These folks have a full-time job, and it's just as their class for them. They come in and out. These folks career line, focused on teaching 1 or 3 year contracts. Okay, and these folks tenure eligible, but have a research focus. Okay, there is also, I will tell you, in academia, particularly at research universities, and this is unfortunate, but I'm going to just be honest with you. Okay, there's a caste system. Okay, you know what I mean by caste system? Okay. So CRD, I think it's better than most, but they're not perfect. Okay, I'm sure Aaron and Claire and Nate will tell you not perfect. Some folks really like the tenured faculty. It's just like, well, I'm better than you because I'm tenured. But there's still, like, to be perfectly frank, like my voice carries more weight in decisions than Aaron, Claire, and Rebecca. It's not right, but that's just so you know. So also extend those folks sympathy because they're like, not like me, like I'm safe and my voice matters. Yeah, like because I care about my job, it's still stressful, but it is different. It's different. All right, so the folks who do do the research. So like, what do we write about? You can actually look it up quite easily on Google Scholar. So Google Scholar has profiles. It's like a nerd Facebook. You can't comment, but so you can go to Google Scholar. You can look up any of your professors on Google Scholar. Almost all of us will have a profile, and it'll tell you all our publications. So you can kind of see what we write about. It tells you all our publications. It tells you when they're written. It tells you how many times they've been cited. Yeah, we get a little like I obsess. This is H-index number, which is like your kind of like your ranking. That's not as much now that I'm tenured. Before tenure, I was super obsessed over what that number was. Okay. But yeah, you obviously want people to be citing your stuff more. So there's a snippet of mine. You can look it up on Don't Choose or anyone else. Okay. How does one become a professor? I'm getting to your question, Joe. Most of your full-time professors, so not the adjuncts, not the faculty associates, not the part-time. Most of your full-time professors, most have a doctorate degree. Okay. There are two types of doctorate degrees. PhD, Doctor of Philosophy. Okay. PhDs train you to do research. They train you to create knowledge. Okay. And then there are what we call professional doctorates, okay, which is more like how do you do the job. So a JD, so a lawyer, is technically a doctorate degree. One you might hear is an EDD, a doctorate of education. Most of your professors have a not all, but most do. When in doubt, say doctor. No one's going to be fitted if they're not. They'll tell you they're not. There's a couple that are not. I won't tell you. Okay. So how do you get a PhD? So let's talk about graduate school. So you may have heard these. I'll be funny for a second. It's not that funny. Okay. You get your BS degree, stands for, okay. Then you get your MS degree, which stands for more of the same. And then you get your PhD, which is piled higher and deeper. That's the running really bad joke. Michael Crow gives a variation of this every year at graduation. So bachelor's degree, which is where you are, roughly the goal here is you are learning to think. So you're learning to think critically. You're learning how to apply that to a little bit. You're learning how to learn. Okay. But really you are learning to think, based on the knowledge. Okay. Again, you have Bachelor of Science, Arts, Business, Social Work, lots. There's minor distinctions in these. It's not that important. At the master's level, okay, I think you are now learning to learn. Okay. Like, how do you independently learn? And you're like, I learn all the time. And yeah, but it's like being a little more critical about it. Okay. For my take, and these two might have a different opinion, they're closer to it than I am. Like, a master's degree is advanced undergrad. Okay. When you go from master's to PhD, it's a bigger jump. But it's kind of like, I think of it as bachelor's, master's, and then PhD is a bigger jump. Is that, they're nodding their heads, yeah. They're in the middle of their PhDs, so like, yeah. So again, you have Master of Science, Master of Arts, and you have professional masters like Master of Business, Masters of Social Work, Masters of Public Administration. Okay. At the doctorate level, particularly PhD, you are learning how to create knowledge. Okay, so I'm no longer learning what other people did. I am contributing knowledge. Okay, I am learning new things. I am sharing new things. I am publishing those new things. Ideally, that's how it works. Okay. Master's degrees, usually 2 years, give or take. Okay. You'll take advanced coursework in theory. You take a statistics class. It's not that bad. You're doing fine. This class should be fine. And then methods class. So statistics and methods, we do both of that in here, just a little bit lighter. So you actually have 2 classes of it. Okay. And then you'll complete a thesis, which is you're collecting data, analyzing data, writing it up. Okay, so you're doing that on a much smaller scale in this class. Okay. This, it's a long project. You get like 6 credits devoted just to this, and you probably need more than 6 credits. Or you can do an applied project, something lighter. Okay, it's up to you, and there's pros and cons to each. Okay. I say approximately 2 years, here and increasingly everywhere, we have the accelerated program where you can get your undergrad and master's in a total of 5 years. Okay, if you're strategic about when you take classes. There are pros and cons to that. The pro is you get a master's degree pretty affordably because you only have an extra year. The con is you're not getting as in-depth of experience, and you may not be getting practical experience as well. Okay. All right, this is to me, because oftentimes I get asked, like, should I go to graduate school? And so this is my take on it. Take it for what it's worth or throw it out, which is probably what you should do with it. Okay. My opinion on master's degrees, this is what I tell people all the time. A master's degree without experience is just a piece of paper. A master's degree with experience is a multiplier effect. Okay, so it takes your experience and multiplies the value of that, or it takes your master's degree and multiplies the value of that. Okay. Now, most of the people in this school, or you're getting experience along the way, honestly, you have internships, and so you have to. So you're actually in pretty good shape with this. But I've seen people like me when I was younger, who just went straight through school in a non-practical degree, got a master's degree, and I was like, what the heck do I do with this piece of paper? And career switch is what I ended up doing. So for you, I probably don't need to worry about it too much, but it amplifies the value of experience. Okay, but without experience, you still don't have experience. Was there a question? Do you have a question, Savannah?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm just yawning.
No, you're fine. All right, doctorate degree, usually an additional 4 to 5 years. You hear the horror stories of someone who took 10, that's rare, it's rare. And usually those folks are working. 4 to 5 years, again, more advanced coursework, theory, statistics, methods, a lot of independent work, okay? And now I think I'm finally getting to your question, Joe. You work very closely with your advisor, okay? These folks get sick of me. They meet with me a minimum of 1 hour a week. It's usually multiple hours a week we spend together. Because ultimately you're gonna write a dissertation, okay, which is a huge research project or multiple research projects, which is gonna be your capstone. Dissertations take a year, give or take.
How long are they?
There is no right answer to that, but because you want an answer, I'm gonna say 100 to 150 pages. Roughly, give or take.
My boyfriend did one that was 40 pages because he's from the UK, so
Yeah.
they have to graduate.
Yeah, so
And I was like,
UK is a whole different system.
couldn't
Whole
pay me
different
to,
system.
couldn't pay me to do that.
But usually 4 to 5 years, you work very closely with your advisor. Okay. I gave a very generic answer. Did you want to, was there something else you wanted to know?
No.
Okay. So it's going to relate to my next question. Sometimes people ask me, like, how do I choose a graduate program? Okay. One, obviously look at the program. Is it of interest to you? Is the topic interest? But what people don't look at the faculty. Look at what the faculty are, like, read their bios. What are they researching? What are they experts in? Okay. Absolutely essential for a PhD. If you apply for a PhD, a faculty member has to essentially sponsor you and say, I'll work with them to be accepted. Because like you are going to spend, again, a lot of time with that faculty. So you need to get along with them. You need to be interested in what they're doing, because you're going to end up helping them with what they're doing. They need to be interested in what you're doing. So the most important thing is their faculty. At the master's level, it depends. Okay. Like for us, if you were to get your master's degree with us, because our master's program is small, you will work a lot with your faculty advisor, so it's important. Okay. If you're getting your MSW with 1,000 students, you may never meet your advisor. But small programs, again, meet the faculty. Okay, reach out to them before you apply. Don't just apply randomly. Like go look at the faculty and go, oh, that person, like they look interesting. The research they're doing is interesting. Email them, talk to them. Ask them if you're interested, ask them, and I always do this with prospective grad students, ask them if you can talk to their students without them. Like these folks know I often set up calls with potential graduate students. I'm like, all right, I'm leaving now. Like they can tell you all the real stuff without me pitching it. Okay. So reach out and talk to someone, talk to students in that program. If you might think maybe you have some interest in graduate school one day, and you can always talk to me. But I'll give you a couple other options. So on Fridays at 11 a.m., we, meaning me and my graduate students and a couple others who have just kind of joined us, meet on Zoom Fridays 11, and we talk about our research, we check in, we practice presentations. What do? We
Talk about life.
we talk about it's a bit of a support group, but it's kind of a good way to like, what's grad school like? To just kind of pop in and hear from them, and I'm sure they would be happy, and I would be happy for you to join that if you just like, can I just listen in and kind of hear what they're talking about? What are they worried about? What are they thinking? What's going on in their lives? They'll tell you. Last grad school related, but again, I do this with my grad students. This semester, we're doing it Thursdays at 2, so after this class, we jump on Zoom, 2 p.m. every Thursday. We have this brief, like, here's what I'm gonna work on for the next hour. So this is great if you have trouble focusing. We say, here's what I'm gonna work on for the next hour. Then we have this app, which I'm like an evangelist for. It's silly, but it's called Forest, and you plant trees, virtual trees. And the way you set a timer, and during that time, you can't look at your phone. If you look at your phone during that time, it kills the tree. It literally withers in front of you. And if you succeed, then you plant the tree, and then you gradually get this growing forest on your phone. So the other thing with that app is you can do it as a group. So we all get on at 2 o'clock. We briefly check in, like, here's what I'm gonna work on, here's what I'm gonna work on. We do a group session. So if one person looks at their phone, it kills everybody's tree. And then in an hour, we come back, we check in, how did it go? And that's that. So you're also always welcome to join us for that. What else do you want to know? I do want to spend, we're about 7 minutes, sometime on at 5. But what other questions do you have about universities, grad school? Part of the reason these folks are here is because I told them you can ask them questions. Yeah, Megan.
This is for all of the students. What is the best and worst part of grad school?
You need to leave.
It's a good question. I would say that you are exposed to a lot of opportunities. And I didn't realize that there were so many things available. You just have to really look for it. So that's definitely the best part for me, is that you just get to know so many different faculty members that really help you give new ideas, and so many things I didn't even know I wanted to do. Now I work on topics I never thought of and I love now. So it really opens your eyes to that.
Yeah,
For the worst.
I think the best part has been, this program has been amazing. Like, as you all know, all of your professors, I feel so comfortable going into any of their offices just because they hire chat, which I think is really rare. I think the hardest part for me personally was my master's was very practically set up. We barely touched research. We had like an introduction to research methods, but it was all practical and sport administration. So transitioning from that to a PhD was a little bit of a learning curve for me, whereas Katie did her master's here and she was set up for research immediately in her master's. So
I will say, if like ASU's version of a master, I didn't realize how much research you do, because I really expected it to be just like your undergrad, taking a lot of classes. But you do a lot of research, so go into it knowing that, but it's really exciting once you know how to do the research and get into it.
Katie submitted her first paper yesterday. Haley did a couple months ago. What else? You can ask them when I'm out of there if they make it. You can always talk to me. I'm sure they are happy to talk to you if you want to reach out to them after class. In the interest of time, I'm going to talk about App 5. There's no good transition here, so here we go. What I've done is set up a scenario. So you've been hired by this hotel. They've implemented this program about sustainability for the earth. They do what we call this quasi-experimental, because it's not necessarily a random assignment, but 2 groups. One group participates in the program, one group does not. Both groups get a survey. You can click and look at the survey. Okay, so I recommend you look at the survey. And then you get results, okay? So, who have participated, used their water bottle more, they reuse their towels more, public transport, not much difference. Right, there's a correlation between water bottle and taking public, well, there's a correlation statistic at least. Then we have just for the people who participated, if they saw the social media posts, okay, this was their usage. If they did not, this was their usage. Okay. Not, you can look at those numbers and say not much difference. And then based on that, what do you conclude? Why? What would you recommend? So ways to think about this. Okay, don't blurt. Okay. Look at this, does the program work? If so, in which categories does it work? Which categories does it not seem to work? So we're like, how big is big enough? Didn't make a judgment call. Make a judgment call. Okay, we're not gonna look at significance. Okay. Anything to do with that correlation or maybe nothing? Does social media work? Okay, people who saw the post, was their behavior, people who did not. So based on that, what would you do? If the program works, maybe you continue it. Okay, if it works on a couple things but not on one thing, maybe you change something about the program to address that one thing. Okay. Did social media work? If so, maybe you continue it. If not, maybe you get rid of it, maybe you change it, okay, but connect it. The number one thing I am looking for, I think, the results are fairly simple, but when you make your recommendation, okay, here's the line. To achieve maximum results, these recommendations should be specific and clearly indicate how they're connected to the data. So here's the language I recommend. Based on the fact that people who saw the social media post did not use their water bottle any more than people who did not, I recommend making more posts about water bottle usage or getting rid of the social media because it doesn't work. A couple things you can do there. Okay. That's the key. That's the key to really do well, is to connect data to recommendation. Explain why. Sometimes I see people and they have this really cool, interesting recommendation. Like, that's a cool idea. That has nothing to do with the data. It's a cool idea. Nothing to do with the data. Okay. So connect those dots. Questions about that? You can always stay after. I know some gotta go. Remember, next week, I'll remind you in Canvas, no in-person class. Work on this. App 6 is looking up articles in the library and answering some questions about them. I'll have some videos that'll walk you through how to do that. So you'll just watch the videos. Don't wait till the last minute because you're gonna have to watch videos and go through it. But hopefully that's just kind of follow along. I'll be available via email or text if you have questions, but I am not in town.
This is due on Monday.
Okay.
Okay. Whatever it says, whatever you think.
We just had to work on it, like as our class.
Oh, wow, boy, that was sneaky. Good catch. All right, it's like when you go to the store and they accidentally charge you the wrong amount and then you have to pay for it. If you'll send me a note, I will, wait, you already get 3 days grace period.
No, it's fine. It's just putting
All
up.
right. All right, I was about to go really soft. I was already get 3 days grace period. All right. All right, folks, thank you. I know the day was a little bit different. Doesn't show up on your test. Go, you have that. What else did you learn in this class? You can always put this. But maybe you found something interesting and learned something new about the university or professors, and maybe that was interest to you. If not, don't tell me. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Have a great Halloween, a great weekend, a great week. Because I will see you in almost 2 weeks.
So no in-person class.
No in-person class at all next week.
Oh, for both days?
Oh, also, folks, I realize next week, some of you are just over it, but some of you, it's gonna be super stressful. Take care of yourself. Be nice to yourself. Find a support group.
And I like was like, can you make it the smallest possible? Like, I wanted to make it really